but that's okay.
Very weird.
Okay, let's go. We'll do something. Let's say something. Even though some things are a little freaky here. So the purpose of this talk, we're going to talk about creationists because they're fun to laugh at. So what I thought we'd do is we just each of us say a few things about the strangest, weirdest, funniest, stupidest criticism of evolution that you've heard so far. So that's the purpose here. Let's have fun making fun of creationists. Does anybody want to start? Does anybody have something juicy they want to tell us about? You're all so quiet. Okay, then I'll start. Can you see this?
Oh yeah.
This thing is a gold mine of stupid arguments. And there's a bunch of familiar ones here that you've probably all heard from me before. You know, the bulk of this very expensive, very thick, very high quality book consists of pictures of fossils that Harun Yahya stole from somewhere. And what he then says is, oh, gee, it's exactly the same as it always has been, therefore evolution is false. But what you don't know is that there's also some prefatory material that is hilarious. And this is what I got to show you. It's a very heavy book to manipulate. There is a section at the beginning. There's actually a couple of volumes of this. This is the second volume. There's a section at the beginning of this where they basically say if Darwinist claims are true, then chance and mutations should give rise to considerable lack of proportion, balance, and peculiarity in the perfect and magnificent human body. And then what they do is they go nuts with Photoshop. What you see here, what I'm showing you, is a page full of Photoshopped skeletons, human skeletons, where they've stuck in multiple limbs, multiple heads, distorted things, twisted things around. And they make the argument that if evolution were true, we ought to be seeing those everywhere. Here's another example on the next page. Some skulls.
Whoa.
Why the heck don't we have any humans who are born with 6 eyes?
God, that'd be so cute to have on Halloween.
What about 3 brains? You know, clearly evolution predicts this, he wants to say. So, you know, what he says is, yet not a single example exists. A great many human fossils with 2, 3, 4, or 4 heads, with hundreds of eyes like insects, with several arms and even arms 2 or 3 meters in length, and many other such abnormalities should have been found.
That would be so useful.
What book is that? It's huge. It's just loaded with stuff like that?
It's loaded with stuff like that.
It reminds me of that. It reminds me of that phrase, like, word X, I don't think that means what you think it means. Like, evolution, I don't think that means what you think it means.
Yes.
Was I seeing that picture right? Were those eye sockets photoshopped into the chin?
Yes, exactly.
God, to make a good heavy metal album cover.
This is kind of a permutation of the creationist argument that, you know, they expect crocoducts or that cats should be born from dogs or things like this. They make these ludicrous claims. But, you know, the thing is that human beings evolved from prior ancestors who were bilaterally symmetric and who had 1 head with 2 eyes. There was never an ancestor, you know, in our recent ancestry that tinkered with variations in numbers of heads or numbers of eyes or how many limbs we have. That's actually one of the limitations of evolution, is that you can't just freely add anything you want, or we would have 6-legged tetrapods, which would be kind of useful. So what we've got here is this example where they're making these ludicrous claims about what evolution ought to have in a complete absence of any knowledge of what evolution actually says. And this is a really common thing in creationism. And you were asking what this book was. This is a book called The Atlas of Creation. It is published by Harun Yahya, the Turkish creationist.
Oh.
Right. This is the book.
And Otkar, whatever his name is.
Yes.
Is he the same guy who had the book which had like, look at this fossil and look at this thing, they never changed, and one of them happened to be a fishing fly. And
yeah. So it seems to me that Harun Yahya has actually taken something to heart that people say about science, which is that science should be predictive, and actually you can make predictions and use those predictions to test whether your theory is accurate. But this is like a case of a little knowledge being a dangerous thing, because what he's interpreted that to mean is that you can just make up any old bullshit that you want off the top of your head, and if it doesn't conform to your arbitrary expectations, then you've proven it wrong.
Exactly.
I've kind of come across works like that, which are not by creationists, but by people who kind of misunderstood how evolution works. So they end up going, man, evolution is wrong. Here's my alternative theory of how evolution should work. And when you read it, it all comes from like people who don't really understand. So I remember being handed a copy of this book, which is like very beautifully illustrated. And I think, PZ, you might have written about it back on the Pharyngular blog back when it was on Science Blogs. It was this guy who thinks that everything on this planet has arisen from some underlying geometry of the cell. And there's all these like very origami-looking, pictures. Like the illustrations are fantastic. Like I'm into arty stuff, but he's completely wrong, scientifically speaking.
Yes.
I think the first and most important thing you can say to people like that is check your understanding of the word theory, because you don't have a theory, you have a conjecture.
I think there's a lot more to it than just that, though. I think it's kind of trying to have this absurd, oh well, evolution predicts this, and then instead of being able to argue the actual points, you have to go, no, that's not exactly it, and they're just kind of trying to make it completely as absurd as they possibly can do it, so that you don't ever actually address real evolution.
Right. And I think the person that Tommy was referring to is a guy named Stuart Pevar, who came up with this elaborate theory that donuts are the basis of everything, toroidal shapes. And he had these elaborate diagrams. They're really nice diagrams of contorting donut-shaped things into the shapes of animals.
That should be the Homer Simpson theory.
Right, but it has no connection whatsoever with the evolution that we've got on record. It has no connection to embryology. It's just total flaming nonsense. And what he wanted to do, though, is he wanted to come up with this all-encompassing umbrella theory that explained everything we see in biology from a very simple principle. And I think another thing.
I was just going to say, I remember going through the book and thinking that he must have read about the new discoveries in developmental biology and completely misunderstood the implication, because he's saying that genetic material, DNA, plays no role in the formation of the body, and it's all just like these cell mechanism. It's like, well, that's not completely right. He's just basically misunderstood everything and came up with his own ideas of how everything works.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, he's actually basing it a lot on a work from Darcy Wentworth Thompson on growth and form, which was published around the time of World War I. Okay, that was the first publication, and it's a great book. But it's a book that tries to explain phenomena in biology without recourse to discussing genetics or genes, and unfortunately, it has been left behind on the tide of history. It is not the way that biology works. I think he's got some valuable points to make, Wentworth Thompson at least had valuable points to make, but it's an incomplete picture, and it doesn't answer all the questions we have.
Greta Christina did a really great post on Alternet just a couple of days ago where...
She always does that. Come on.
I know she does. But again, this one was titled, Why Are Believers Willfully Ignorant About Atheists? And she was talking particularly about sort of the emotional and moralistic arguments where Christians feel free to just assume what atheists believe and then tell them that instead of asking them. And that very much applies to fields of science too. Like creationists make up their own concept, especially like Ray Comfort, who's been corrected on his understandings over and over again, and it can't have failed to register. He just chooses not to think about the way evolution actually works because his crocoduck fantasies are more fun.
Yeah, this is the thing. If you've got a willfully ignorant view of the world, you can't go around learning new things because they might undermine the entire basis for what you're saying, and that's the boat creationists are in right now. Okay, anybody else have creationist stories you'd like to tell?
Yes. Well, this is about geology. There's some gentleman named Walt Brown who has his hydroplate theory. He's a young earther, and he believes that about the time of just after Noah's flood, the Earth's continents were all together as Pangaea, but that they moved around to their present positions over the next couple centuries or maybe a millennium or so. And yes, he thinks that the bottoms of the plates float on top of the mantle by having a layer of water in between as a lubricant.
Walt Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about that guy. Wildwood Claire on YouTube gave him an intellectual boot to the butt.
So we've got geologists here. I don't know if we can allow that, but okay. Yeah, Walt Brown and his whole hydroplate theory. It's ludicrous stuff, and it doesn't work. Mathematically, physically, chemically. It's all. It's a science salad. He just kind of throws everything together in there and mushes them around, and he hopes it sounds persuasive to the rubes. But anybody who knows anything about any of these fields is just flabbergasted when they hear him recite this stuff.
Those photoshopped pictures you showed earlier reminded me of a creationist that we used to argue with back on CompuServe forums. Back with me and Ed Brayton and Greg Layden were arguing with these guys. And he had this whole thing about, well, if evolution's true, the Japanese pearl divers should be evolving blowholes on the back of their heads. And he said, well, show me the pearl divers with the blowholes evolving. It's like, what?
Well, and the weirdest thing is that blowholes are simply nostrils moved backwards, and one can even see that in the fossil record of cetaceans. They started out pointing forward, then they gradually moved backwards until they got on the top of the head.
Yeah, and actually, I think he's right. If Japanese pearl divers adopted this practice full time and isolated themselves from the rest of humanity and had a few million years to work on it, you might get adaptations that make them better suited to an aquatic life. Wouldn't necessarily be blowholes.
And their livelihoods would have to depend on it, right? It's not enough that they just do something a lot. It's that they have to die at variable rates.
Yeah, there has to be some process that filters the population and says that individuals who are better at diving, better at surviving in an aquatic environment, are going to preferentially reproduce in the population.
Yeah, which means as long as scuba gear is available and not making blowholes necessary. It would have to be like pearl divers who are either very, very poor and can't afford to buy stuff, or people who just for some reason have decided that they're not going to use technology even if it kills them.
And they have to eat
Technology
oysters
ruins
all the
everything.
time. And they just have to eat oysters all the time, nothing else, and that's the reason. You know, their life literally depends on it. You know?
Do we have any Amish pearl divers is what I wonder now.
But
That live off oysters.
if that were the case, I would think we would see more pearl divers with the ability to hold their breath longer and longer. But in order for a blowhole to emerge, it would have to be an isolated population of pearl divers who exclusively stay in the water, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It would take a long time. It would take reproductive isolation, and it would require a set of circumstances that shape the population to fit this new role. And none of those are true right now. So it's not likely to happen. And it's not going to happen in a generation.
There are other mutations that are much easier than moving the nostrils to the top of the head, like making webbed hands and feet, so they can become fins, sort of like what seals have. Their nostrils are still just above their mouths, but their limbs are turned into flippers.
Well, this guy didn't even understand that cetaceans have their skull's been reshaped. He actually thought that the blowhole was like on the back of their neck, rather than being on their head.
It's like Pokemon style evolution.
So it's sort of like, so they did like this, take their nostrils and move them backwards.
Right, telescoped.
I wonder what Animal Planet's watching this and taking notes right now for the next episode.
No, I'm sure they're.
Oh yes, that's for the next script. Yes.
And I'm pretty sure they're probably reading the Creationist Atlas, and there be dragons.
Oh no.
Or they get the new UFO program on National Geographic
Yes.
channel. That's encouraging.
Did anyone see the statement that the NAOO put out to say that, look guys, there are no mermaids? Like they have to put a statement now to tell people there are no mermaids.
I posted it on Feringula. I was shocked that they had to say this, but yeah, it's out there.
Yeah.
That's like what the National Health Care thing or whatever it was, the CDC saying, there are no zombie outbreaks, don't worry about it.
Well, the CDC actually used it in a very nice way to highlight, reasonable emergency procedures.
Right.
Yeah, NOAA, it seems like they just sort of nonchalantly announced that, okay, there really aren't any. That's all you need to know.
Well, the fact that they need to deny it just shows that there's a government cover-up about it.
Of course.
Yeah,
they're part of the government too,
Well, this blowholes issue reminds me of another creationist misconception. A lot of creationists seem to talk about organs coming out of nowhere, like limbs and wings and so forth, and internal organs and so forth. Well, it's very clear that they developed from a lot of previous structures. Vertebrate wings are all front limbs, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really kind of a disappointing limitation of being a tetrapod, isn't it? That we've only got 4 limbs for evolution to work on. There is some interesting evolutionary stuff out there. The early precursors, we think limbs evolved from condensations in fin folds, and there was an option there. They could have, our distant ancestors could have formed 6 fins, 3 on each side, but they didn't, and now we're stuck with it. And we don't have any flaps here that we can work with, that we can modify into or that evolution can shape into limbs at this point. Unless limb handles become prehensile, that's a possibility.
Okay,
Yep.
What?
Oh, go on.
Are you still on the same subject?
No, feel free. Chime in with something new.
I've got a question that a lot of people even those who should know evolution well seem to think. Idiocracy. Is that a legitimate idea of what's going to happen going forward? That I mean, people always tell me that they take the idiocracy setup very seriously, and I tell them that in humans at least, intelligence is passed on a lot more by memes than by genes, and so it doesn't matter that stupid people have more kids. What do you think?
Oh, well, I think that it seems that every generation there's always people saying, oh, look at this generation, they're more stupid than the last, or no, look at these kids, they don't know anything about anything. It just seems to be like itself a meme that just floats around in culture, that, you know, the new generation is always, you know, worse than the last one. We're all going to go downhill from there, and, yeah.
Well, there's a little more to the theory, if I can call it that, than that, which is basically that because of the introduction of birth control, smarter people tend to have fewer kids, and dumber people aren't smart enough to use the birth control, and so there's going to be a selective bias for that.
I guess that assumes that the stupid people are, like, stupid is completely determined by genes as opposed to, say, education and other environmental factors as well. So, yeah.
And for education, there's those new Texas standards I'm reading about, which I don't know. looks like they're doing their best to bring it about that way.
Right, and one of the things I always say about the actual movie itself is that it undercuts its own message, because they have one guy who's smarter than everyone else, and he manages to outsmart everyone and become the leader. So that kind of, really undermines the idea that there's no selective advantage in being smart.
Yeah, the other thing that bugged me about the movie is, I could see a future evolutionary events shaping human populations to de-emphasize intelligence. You know, we could go back to living the life of rodents or something. But that's not going to go hand in hand with a technological civilization. And the movie illustrates a highly technological civilization with all kinds of machinery and automation around. There has to be somebody who's maintaining that. There has to be people who are intelligent enough to build the stuff. So it's
apparently they get to keep the technology around for hundreds of years, which, speaking as a software engineer, is bunk. You can't go a week without something breaking down.
Right, yeah. So, it's an amusing movie, but it really falls apart pretty quickly when you think about what the actual evolutionary story would be. If it were, if this guy went into suspended animation and he woke up 1,000 years from now and found that people were, living lives as scavengers on garbage heaps, and now no longer was intelligence selected for, and they were getting stupider. Yeah, I could sort of see that, but the story as it is doesn't work. Really, it doesn't. We're not going down that path.
I think one would need human-scale artificial intelligence to get it working. And that's been really, really, really difficult. It's one of the great disappointments in my life.
Well, that's easy to solve.
Well, yeah, and if in fact, that's another option for our future, is that we get replaced by the artificial intelligence. If that happened, I mean, what's the purpose of continuing to exist as intelligent beings if we've got smart robots to do everything for us? That would be another way.
As long as I can upload my brain, I'm cool with that.
As long as you can be one of the intelligent robots, yes, that's good. Okay.
Do with the H.G. Wells version, where you have two castes of humans, and the Morlocks will be the ones that maintain everything, and then use the rest of us as cattle.
Yeah, but that represents another kind of speciation event, doesn't it? That represents a case where now we've got certain internal factors that separate out two populations, and the Morlocks and the Eloi wouldn't be interbreeding with each other, so unless they were, but then that adds a whole new kinky dimension to H.G. Wells.
On the subject of human intelligence and where it's going. I'm not quite sure how he quantifies it, but I think I've heard Michael Shermer mention that with the society is in fact getting more intelligent.
Yeah, you're talking about like the Flynn effect?
Probably.
Yeah. I think that gets back to a point that was made earlier, though, is that brains are plastic and they're responsive to the environment. So we've got this huge capacity up here, and it can be shaped by our environment, by our culture, to what's this?
Speaking Mike.
Nova's mic isn't working.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh.
Okay. If you
There's
leave
a
little
cat
notes up.
inside, Nova.
Next time.
Up in the top left corner, there's something that says chat. If you click, you can start typing.
Right.
Yep. QWERTY indeed.
And for some reason, I can't see PZ on. Well, I can't see PZ or Russell on my Hangout window.
Oh, well.
Are you sure the window's open big enough?
Well, I have two monitors, and I tried stretching the window across both, and I'm only seeing the people that I see now.
Okay. Well, in my case, you're not missing much, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay. Anyone else have anything interesting to bring up about creationists?
Another interesting misconception is some of them talk about the sexes evolving separately for millions of years, and also talking about how difficult it would be for the ancestral members of each sex to meet each other since they'd all evolved separately or something like that.
That's a Ray Comfort
talking
thing.
about Ray Comfort.
Yeah,
That's
I
Ray
remember
Comfort's
reading that.
game. Yeah.
God, he hammered that in so many bloody times in his blog. No matter how many times it got pointed out to him, you got it wrong or so. Oh, jeez, no.
Yeah. No, that was ridiculous stuff. I mean, again, it's like what I was saying with the fact that we don't have humans with multiple heads. It's because we are derived from ancestors who were bilaterally symmetric with single heads, and so you wouldn't expect us to vary that much from it. And similarly, we have two sexes because we evolved from ancestors who had two sexes. This wasn't an innovation that we had to create. If you want to go back to find a case where species are evolving this new property of sex, you have to go back to single-celled organisms where it wasn't such a big deal. It's not like the first sexually reproducing bacterium would have had to segregate into populations with one side having breasts and the other side having penises or anything. It just mating types. That's all you needed.
Yes. Furthermore, different mating types of a lot of the more primitive organisms look alike, except perhaps if you could know which molecules to look for.
Right.
So it's a pretty natural intermediate. It's surprising how many such intermediates one can find. When creation.
Well, I know in the fungi kingdom, there's a lot of like mating types that don't really quite correspond with males and females, and also in slime molds as well. And I forget what the term that they have, but it's not male or female. It's like something type or something type.
Some of them just often I see plus or minus. I don't know what names they or whether they just give them numbers.
Yeah.
But
it's mating type loci have all these variations, so there's all kinds of complications that you can have with these things.
That's one of those things. I don't think Ray Comfort is ignorant to it. He's been explained to it hundreds of times, over and over again. It's just he has this little, okay, I'm going to keep doing this ridiculous thing and not get the answer because it would prove that he's wrong, and he's making money off of it.
So you prefer the liar theory over the idiot theory?
I think he's a liar, yeah.
I think a hell of a lot of them are, really, but...
Yeah, I'm pretty much convinced he's a liar because he's been corrected too many times, and as was stated earlier in this conversation, it could not have not sunk in by now.
Yeah, but liar and stupid are not mutually incompatible. I vote for both.
I will say for him though, having spent an hour on the phone with him, he's a liar and an idiot, but a very, very polite one.
He's smooth. He's slick. Yeah, he's the preacher type. But yeah, and that's another sad thing about this whole religion issue is that to succeed in religion, you do not need to be intelligent. You need to have certain social skills, which I agree are valuable, but that's all you need.
Public speaking.
They are, and what I've been saying for a long time is that people who are on our side who are convinced they're right often have the misconception that being right is all it takes. And I'm a strong advocate of adopting the tactics of religion, and that doesn't mean becoming religious. It just means observing what they do effectively in social situations and imitating it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've perceived something similar to that. I look at somebody like Ray Comfort, who is well-dressed, well-kept, he speaks well, he's very polite, and then I look at Seth Andrews, and I think, there's our guy who, the thinking atheist. I mean, there's our radio voice who is well-spoken, intelligent, and just not as dumb or dishonest as Ray Comfort is.
But the dumb and dishonest thing isn't the positive traits he has going for him, specifically. I mean, it's the slickness that PZ described.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be scary if one of these people was actually smooth and slick and intelligent? Then we'd have to worry.
But then they wouldn't be creationists.
It seems like, you're right, yeah, but it seems like the fact that you have to accept this creationist idea is what filters out the intelligent people from the population.
Like if Ken Miller became a creationist.
We could argue that in some ways he is.
Well, I mean, a creationist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true that there are some scientists who argue for godly intervention in our history, and they are a little bit more effective because they are obviously intelligent people. They're just wrong.
I tried to use Ken Miller as an example of a religious person who was a creationist, and my parents went, "No, but he's a Catholic. He's not actually a Christian."
And then there's all those scientists who are Jews. They're obviously they're obviously religious, right? Secular Judaism never occurs.
I'm laughing at Nova crossing her eyes.
Any others?
Yes. Going back on the whale evolution sort of thing, they're one of weird things. Jonathan Sarfati, his Refuting Evolution book, has a little jewel in there. He's listing all the problems with why whales couldn't have evolved, and gets this one point and he goes, another problem is that they would have had to have twisted their spines to get the up and down tail motion. And the only thing I can get out of that is somehow he thinks that they should be swimming with a side-to-side motion like fish, and they had to rotate their spines 90 degrees at some point to get the up and down tail motion. It's like, what?
Yeah, in Carl Zimmer's book At the Water's Edge, he's got a good discussion of this. That who was it? A guy named Fish, who actually does locomotor physiology.
Fish. I think he filmed a lot of swimming otters and looking at how they kind of move that up and down motion.
Exactly.
Mammals in general have the spine kind of goes this way rather than side to
side. He kind of concluded that whales kind of gallop underwater, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. They took our physiological locomotor machinery, which is adapted for tetrapod existence, which means that terrestrial vertebrates do that. They don't except for reptiles and things like that. They do the vertical movement because it's more efficient. And so when they went back to the water, they readopted that particular pattern. And it makes perfect evolutionary sense. And like I say, Zimmer has a really good discussion of that in his book, which is well worth looking into. Okay, I have another one I want to bring up. And this is because one of the criticisms we'll often get is that we evolutionists were always picking on the easy targets. Ray Comfort, oh man, he's stupid, he's easy, he's always bringing up these really ridiculous arguments. I want to bring up one that I talked about recently on the blog, that the elite of intelligent design creationism all got wrong. And that was the recent sequencing of the gorilla genome.
Who is the elite? The Discovery Institute?
Yes, the people at the Discovery Institute who pretend to be real scientists. They're not Christians. They're real scientists. And they're secular scientists who are making, they say, who are making.
You don't hear that much from Michael Behe these days, I notice.
Yeah, but he still pretends to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, what happened was the gorilla genome was sequenced, and then of course they do the reasonable thing. They compare it to the human and chimpanzee genome. And what they discovered was something that the paper casually mentioned that was exactly what we expected, and that is that humans have some gorilla genes and not the chimpanzee allele. Some chimpanzees have the gorilla allele, but not the human allele. There's this complicated tangle of things, of alleles that are propagated into these different populations. And what it meant is that if you look one by one at individual genes in the genome, you can find some genes that say, yes, humans at this one locus are more similar to gorillas than to chimpanzees. And others where it says you're more similar to chimpanzees than gorillas. And you can do the same sort of pairwise comparisons in chimpanzee and gorilla populations and get these results that don't fit the standard timeline of evolution. And what shocked me was that a whole bunch of creationists, groups like the ICR, Institute for Creation Research, which is full of wackaloons anyway, and the Discovery Institute, Doug Axe, who's always touted as their serious scientist who's doing real biological research in intelligent design, they said the same thing. They said this disproves evolution. It's a conflict with evolution. And the thing is that when you actually read the paper, they don't make a big deal of it because this was actually a result expected from evolutionary theory. That's exactly what we ought to see, is that there ought to be a mosaic of traits because, I think this is the key thing, is they don't understand that what evolves are populations, not individuals. There's this cartoon version of evolution in a lot of people's heads where they say, okay, well, there was this one point where an ape gave birth to a human being, and that human being, that one human being, was then the progenitor of all human populations. And that's not the way it works. It's a very gradual thing. So there was a population 6 million years ago, or whenever whenever the chimpanzee-human split occurred, that bifurcated, but it wasn't a nice, sharp, clean bifurcation where it was two people walking off from the ancestral Chinese chimpanzee population to found a new human population. It was two populations drifting apart. And they carried some gorilla traits related to their great-granduncle, the gorilla, and which of those traits went to fixation in the population varied in the different groups. And this is the weird thing, because this is standard coalescence theory. If you know any population genetics at all, if you know any evolutionary theory at all, we take this for granted. This is what we understand, that it's all population-based. And I know it's not intuitive if you're part of the general public who doesn't think in terms of populations, but for us, it's, well, yeah, that's what you expect. And you could tell when this paper came out that it was like this beautiful, grand, discriminatory fact of the story that you could use to tell the idiots from the smart people. And it was amazing how thoroughly all those people at the Discovery Institute who tout themselves as serious scientists blew it. They got it completely wrong. They didn't understand this concept at all. And what that tells you is that these guys are not serious evolutionary biologists in the slightest, yet here they are pontificating on evolution.
So,
go on.
So about this issue, might it be possible to estimate effective population sizes from it? I think I've seen those estimates in various places.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of, this is the kind of information you can use to put together these estimates of population sizes, and the time of the split and all kinds of information like that. You couldn't do this if evolution were this discrete modular sort of thing where it was individuals suddenly acquiring the key traits of a population, of a modern population. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't work that way, and they don't get it. I think another thing it kind of highlights is, and I think this is relevant in particular to Michael Behe, is people don't seem to realize that biology is this gigantic compendium of multiple disciplines, and that it is possible to be a very, very successful biochemist and not know a thing about evolutionary biology.
But it's butterfly collecting, right? Who was that? Dobzhansky?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to disparage it that way. I mean, what you can actually have a sub-discipline within biology that's got a very focused set of problems that they're working on. For instance, if you're trying to work out the biochemistry of a particular process, if you're trying to work out the underpinnings, the molecular underpinnings of some phenomenon in physiology, where that's just your question. It's a tightly delimited question where we're going to look at this issue and we're going to answer that, and not know evolutionary biology. But if you want to tie together physiology, biochemistry, molecular biology, anatomy, all of these things together into one coherent story, you need evolution. It's the one thing we've got that brings it all together, that makes biology a coherent discipline. It's why biology hasn't flown apart into, oh, well, we'll put the physiologists over here and we'll put the ecologists over there and they'll never talk to each other. We don't do that.
A few years ago, I accidentally came across a paper in Journal of Creation Research. And that's because I was looking up, for clarification, I work on parasitic flukes. So I'm an evolutionary ecologist who does research on parasitic flukes, and usually I have a little, little picture on standby to show people the life cycle of the critters that I work with. So they look something like this. So it has a multiple host life cycle, and basically this guy wrote a paper in Journal of Creation Research explaining how, because it's such a complex life cycle that requires all these various adaptation at different stages of the life cycle, it must have been created by God. And I usually don't get a lot of, I don't deal with a lot of creationist people simply because they know dinosaurs, but they don't even know oftentimes that the stuff that I work with even exists. So it's kind of it's kind of beyond them, but it was interesting coming across this thing in Journal of Creationist Research, writing a paper which is basically a description of a life cycle description of a species of parasite, which is very typical in parasitological journal, but slanting everything at every paragraph as creation of God or something like that.
My dad is a physicist, and he says that, before I'm not a scientist of any kind, so I used to have problems with the concept of how important scientific journals are. But one of the things he explained to me is that there's subcategories of physics where there are a small but vocal number of people who believe in some particular crackpot theory or other, and they can go off and they can create their own very special interest journal, and then they can prop it up with the artificial appearance of respectability because there's enough of them that they can all write papers that reference each other. And so, you know, what he says is that being published in a peer-reviewed journal is a good first pass at, you know, it's a good minimum bar to set for demonstrating that something has some merit. But it is common enough for these fake journals to spring up, and this obviously happens with creationism all the time, that they can just sort of self-reinforce each other within a limited group and look like they've got peer review, even though they've got no mainstream acceptance.
Yeah, that's not only just creationism. You had the panspermia hypothesis doing the same thing, or the guys promoting that. Mm-hmm. If you Google the Journal of Cosmology, that's not a very reputable-looking journal, but the website, I mean, I'm a web designer, so one of the first things I notice is the website is hilariously early 90s.
I got an amusing story along those lines. A couple of years ago, I helped a grad student who got roped into debating Kent Hovind at UC Riverside, and me and a couple other people coached him a little bit beforehand. But during the debate, it came up stuff about carbon dating, and Hovind threw up this reference to this Canadian Journal of Anthropology, and said, you know, and Bradley Hughes, the guy who got roped into debating him, was criticizing what Hovind was saying. Is, well, you don't have any problem with the Canadian Journal of Anthropology, do you? Well, I went and looked up this reference that Hovind had given, and I found it was in two places, in this Canadian Journal of Anthropology, and the article was also republished in the Creation Research Society Quarterly. Mm-hmm. Now, the guy wasn't a creationist, but he had this Canadian Journal of Anthropology turned out to be his own little vanity journal, kind of like what Rita was talking about earlier. It was him and a few of his friends who had this idea about humans being in North America much earlier than standard archaeology considers. And his objection was that the carbon dates were too young, and that these archaeological sites are really much older. So it's sort of the reverse of what the creationists wanted it to be.
Yeah, but the Journal of Cosmology is a good example because they hate me. I exposed those guys. Yeah, and I don't know if you recall, but they had this hilariously personal attack on me on their front page for a long time when they were trying to sell it, because apparently I really undercut the value of the journal. It's gone now. That they've got the guy who was in charge of it before, this Ron Joseph, is now gone, and I don't know. It looks like I'm just looking at it now. It looks like maybe they're trying to be a little bit more serious. I don't know if they will succeed. I mean, the guy who's now running it is one of Ron Joseph's co-authors, so I have my doubts. It's wacky stuff all over the place.
Well, if I had to guess, just looking at their website, they must be really, really underfunded.
Yes, they have not improved the quality of their website. And this is another point, though, is that we could argue that maybe the internet is contributing to this, because they have really lowered the bar on starting a journal. You can make a web-only journal that doesn't require all the startup capital that a print journal would require. And so we're seeing some instances, the Discovery Institute, the ICR, the Answers in Genesis even, they all have their little so-called journals where they publish papers. The Journal of, what is it called for Discovery Institute? Was it Biocomplexity? The Journal of Biocomplexity, something like that. And what they do is they just publish from their own little circle of, chronic masturbators on the internet.
Hey, don't knock masturbating.
Yes, I will knock it if you're doing it publicly and if you're doing it obsessively. Okay.
Don't besmirch the good name of masturbation.
I'm not going to touch that.
There are a couple of people in here who don't have microphones but have been typing in the chat and wanted to bring up something, if I can just find it. Luke said, I had a chat with someone who was a creationist and the subject of global warming came up. At which point this chap said, certain branches of science have been corrupted. Is this someone PZ or yourself has heard of with respect to evolution too? Well, I don't know that anyone can answer that because there are so many people who use the excuse, oh, science is just a big conspiracy against my crackpot point of view, that I don't think you could positively identify anyone from that.
Well, yeah, but I've seen this. I think of it as a syndrome. It's denialism syndrome. You know, there's a guy, Michael Spector, who's written a book on this called Denialism. I recommend it. It's a pretty good book. But the thing is that what you often see is creationists will often be people who also reject the idea of global climate change, anthropogenic climate change. There'll be HIV denialists.
Philip Johnson, I remember that.
Oh yes, Philip Johnson is a great example of this. They'll often be fairly intelligent people because what they're doing is it's like they're overanalyzing everything. They have their little preconceptions, and they have their resentment against authority. That's another common thing that's coming out of this. And so what they do is they build these elaborate conspiracy theories that tie everything together in when you read what they say, it's amazingly intelligent, convoluted stuff that's all wrong. It starts with false premises. But yeah, these things all go together, and they also go together well with things like the Tea Party and the Republican Party.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is more bigger than religion. It's about the entire worldview instead of just religion, you're kind of saying?
Yeah, it's kind of insidious because it's not just trying to deny one thing. It's really going at it from an angle where the logical conclusion is that all of science is invalid. Because if you basically dismiss not just the conclusions, but the overall methodology of coming to a scientific consensus, you're saying that there's no objective way of coming at the truth, which is kind of what they want, because then they can just slip their beliefs in there.
Yeah, I've had some direct experience in dealing with this kind of conversation, and I'll come clean, Russell, and tell you, I'm a supporter of the Zeitgeist movement, and I'll happily admit we too have some conspiracy crazies among us.
I'll ridicule you about that later, but
sure, please do. I would actually be delighted to have a conversation with you about this and your experiences in.
We're talking about the Zeitgeist movement, not just the 9/11 conspiracies, but the
the 9/11 stuff is
Venus Project stuff.
Correct.
Okay,
the whole 9/11 thing.
Okay, but we're getting off topic.
Well, I basically just want to agree with you that that's the angle that I tend to take whenever I deal with somebody who tries to completely invalidate science itself. Is I explain to them, if you do that, then you have no avenue left to verify any of your claims. If you're going to convince me that the science is invalid, then everything is invalid, including everything you would attempt to tell me. You have epistemologically disabled yourself.
It's like Daniel Dennett said once in, I think it was Darwin's Dangerous Idea. He says, well, you just say to that person, no matter what they say, you say, that proves that your God is a ham sandwich wrapped in tin foil. And if they complain, then you say, oh, I see, you just want logic to be invalid when you make arguments, not when I respond.
I might use that one.
Have any of you read a book called Merchant of Doubt? It's by these. Okay, it's I think I have it. Oh, it's
Naomi Oreskes. I've seen her on YouTube.
Okay.
Read it?
Yeah. Well, it was a book about these scientists who kind of give their, lend intellectual credence to the lobby group for various industry, like the tobacco industry or the fossil fuel industry, to deny the science. And in the last chapter of that book, they were talking about this history revisionism on Rachel Carson. They were making up this whole thing about how, Rachel Carson caused all these deaths in Africa because she, caused DDT to get banned. And the last chapter was about how, because science is getting in the way of their corporate interests, they are kind of trying to push for this world view of overturning science, so to speak, as a way of recognizing how the world works so that they'll get to basically do whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Look also at the cigarette industry. Look at the cancer industry. There's a long history of that kind of doubt spreading that's going on. Yeah, and we're seeing it right now with the climate change debate.
Yes, it's the same people that are involved as Naomi Oreskes had discovered.
Yeah, that's what my understanding was.
And you've seen, I'm sure by now most people have seen stuff talking about the recent Republican Party platform here in my illustrious home state of Texas, which actually says that the education standards have too damn much emphasis on critical thinking, and that should go away.
I thought that was a joke when I first heard about it. I can't believe that's real. It just blows my mind.
I was at my parents a couple of weeks ago, and I got from both my sister and brother-in-law. They were talking to me about being an atheist, and the thing they mentioned was that critical thinking and rationalism and logical thinking is all stuff from Satan. It's designed to drag you away from God. And it just baffles me that that's bad. Logic is bad. I don't get it.
Well, it is bad because if your entire worldview depends on rote memorization and acceptance of dogma, then learning is a terrible thing, unless it's purely memorization.
Isn't there some quote from Luther or one of the other earlier church fathers about reason being a whore or something like that?
The devil's whore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually kind of pleased when they come right out and say these things. The Creation Museum does exactly the same thing, and throughout the museum they are setting up this conflict between man's reason on one hand and God's word on the other, and you are supposed to reject man's reason and accept God's word.
Well,
it is that blatant.
They have to walk a fine line here because there's a reason they have to come up with all the trappings of being scientific. It's because they know that people actually in real life respect science. And so you have to at least pay lip service to saying bullshit like, oh, we're the true scientists. Evolution is just religion. But when they come out with these broad statements about how critical thinking is bad, they sort of run the risk of losing whatever pretense of the high ground they're trying to get there.
Right. Yeah. No. It really is a cargo cult phenomenon where they're trying to dress up their stories with the modern successes of science, while trying to ignore the underlying mechanisms behind that success.
Wearing sticks on their heads and pretending they're air traffic controllers.
Yes, you have to go to the Creation Museum and view it through that lens. That's exactly what it's like, is, oh, these guys are pretending to have a museum. Isn't that cute and charming and hilarious?
It's the biblical glasses.
Yes. Okay, I have no idea how long we've been going on here since we actually figured out the technical issues. So
Slightly over an hour.
Maybe? Slightly over an hour, so it's probably a good time to call it to a close. What I will do is, we'll do this again in the future, but I think it's clear what I have to do is I have to set up an invitation list ahead of time.
Yeah, there's a 10-person limit down here, so you have to actually decide, you have to actually do some triage.
Yes. So next time what I will do is I'll put out a call and get names of people, and I will specifically put you in an invitation list and bring in a group of 10 people. I think, it was mentioned earlier by Russell that, yeah, just opening up to the public may not be a good idea because who knows who could show up here.
Ray Comfort.
Get 8 penis pictures.
Yeah, Thunderfoot. I don't know.
Side 10 Bruggencate.
No. Yeah, is there a way where I can click on somebody and say go away? Because we would need that if we had if Cy showed up. Because oh man, he is a moron.
I remember a chat I had with that guy. It was so strange. If I find it, I'll maybe email you guys a text. It was just bizarre. It wasn't about religion or anything, but like just talking to him normally, and it was like I can't describe it. His mind is working differently than any I've ever run into before. I'm wondering if there's something I'm wondering if there is something biologically wrong, but I'd have to find the bloody chat first.
You said the word mind and sigh in the same sentence. I don't know if that works. I think he's kind of got an insect-like ganglion up there, and he responds autonomically to everything.
Yeah, he's threatened to call the show, and I think if he does, my intent is to just chew him out and hang up on him, because I don't want him recording a conversation with me and selling it.
Well, I would kind of like my chat with him. He cut me off from Skype, so I was actually connected with him on Skype. I had a little text chat with him on Skype, not verbal. Sorry, just text. We talked for a bit, and I wound up ticking him off, and he took me off. But like before that, we were just discussing about where he lived, and I swear to God, it was like I'm wondering, is this guy lying about where he lives? Because he's acting like he's ignorant of where the hell he lives. I can't describe it. I'd have to find the text chat. I don't know if I can. If I actually lost it, I'll just kick myself. But it is so bizarre. If I find it, I don't know. I'll email it to somebody or paste it on I don't know. I'll paste it somewhere and I'll send the link to maybe to some. I don't know where I'd send the link actually. But
I met him at the Reason Rally. He pestered me like 3 or 4 times to talk to him, and I just shut him down. I was not going to tolerate him because he's. Yes, I said a few rude words to him and told him to go away, and that was it. But he got a lot of hay out of just that. He said, "Oh, look at these rude, inconsiderate evolutionists who refuse to listen to us." And that's because he's a moron, and I don't want to talk to him.
Although Russell, I would kind of like to see Matt take him on. That'd be kind of entertaining.
I don't think it would be as entertaining as you hope it would.
Well, I'm kind of a geek for the stuff, so.
Yeah.
But there are certain kinds of people you can have conversations with, and certain kinds of people who just want to yell and be assholes. And
yeah. I agree. Matt's really good at give and take. He's really good at getting the conversation going from both sides. And Cy Ten Bruggencate is the exact opposite of that. He's a monologuer. He'll just get up there and say the same things over and over and at you again. I don't think Matt would be able to pull his way through that. Just won't work.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Well, PZ, before we go, I had a quick one that I wanted to share where I had an encounter on Facebook with a creationist. She gave me all the routine garden variety creationist arguments with regard to evolution, but I would like permission to cheat a little bit and share a really funny argument about the academia's perspective on biblical history.
Okay. Sounds like a nice, entertaining way to end the whole discussion.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned a minute ago, we went all around the garden variety creationist arguments about evolution, but then this creationist in question wanted to try and make a counter argument about, of course, the Bible, trying to make a case for why the Bible is God's word written by Moses. And I explained to this woman that academia is pretty much convinced that especially the Old Testament is written by lots of people. And her response was so funny that it bears repeating. She said that academia has it wrong, what happened is that it was written by Moses, but there was no printing press back then, so everything was meticulously hand copied, and because there are lots of different handwriting styles, academia perceived it as multiple authors.
Oh, but
yeah, that's what I said too. But
you know, that's
very
not a conclusion.
creative.
It's not a conclusion of a bunch of angry atheists that it's written by multiple. It's seminaries and schools of theology that are telling us this.
well, I use the term academia, but
Yeah, but so she's
Once again,
actually,
I don't think that word means what she thinks it means.
well, I had to go back and explain to this woman. It's not about handwriting. It has nothing to do with penmanship. It's about vernaculars, terms that are used in specific points in history, political slant that correspond to certain time periods. It has nothing to do with penmanship.
yeah, and ideas that get re-echoed and changed in subtle ways with different authors. Yeah, it's.
Because we have the original manuscripts of all these things, right?
Yes, and also such styles. Some of it seems much more formal than others. Like the style identified as Priestley has lots of lists of who begot who, while some of the other ones like colorful anecdotes.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've gone on way too long, partly because my technological screw-ups at the beginning, so we should stop here, and like I say, we'll do it again in a week or two, probably 2 weeks, and what I will do is on Pharyngula, I will recruit people to specifically tell me they want to be here, and we'll get you on an invite list, and we will try to mix things up and get different people interacting at different times. But thanks, everyone. It's been fun.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Educational in more
Tune
ways
into
than
the
one.
Free Thought Blogs chat tomorrow.
Oh, that's why Russell's here. He's spamming his No, it's a good one too.
No, it's your thing. Not
All right.
mine.
Yes, that's right. We are doing a Free Thought blogs. All the bloggers, well, at least a subset of the bloggers, will be doing the same thing tomorrow morning at the same time, and. Yeah, you're all welcome to listen in, but it's going to be just us talking among ourselves.
See ya.
Okay, so long.
All right, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for having me in.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, thanks for letting me in.
Yeah, bye.